Well, and Michelle, I think that's a great point too, related to some populations. Even though there has been this great technological jump, there's still some populations where it's difficult for them to use technology, whether it's age or income related or access, whatever that is. I've worked with some populations, Native American communities, where they don't have the internet access still on their reservations. So if you need to get to those populations, you have to look for different ways to talk to them. And there's also different cultural aspects of research gathering that you have to keep in mind. So I think one of the things that what you're talking about is bringing up for me is don't make assumptions. You know, many of us are working in these different bubbles. We have our comfort zones. You may think because the world had a technological jump that whatever audience you want to talk to has had that same jump. Just recently, there was a survey that came out from the city. And the way that they did this for a park near us, and they want to put Frisbee golf in. And so they actually sent postcards to the neighboring zip codes. And the only way to access the survey was a QR code. That was it. There was no link. There was nothing that would help a person who didn't know what a QR code was or didn't have a smartphone. There was no other way for them to access this survey. There was no, even going to the city, there was no easy way to the website, no easy way to access what that survey was, even if you wanted to look it up. So I feel like in that aspect, they took this step of innovation, which was awesome. I was so excited to see that, but then didn't necessarily think all the way through the assumptions or the plan B of what if my person that I'm trying to reach can't use this method to give their feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. Took it a little too far.
Right. Well, and there's other populations too. I'm thinking like I worked with some eye care clients where they do cataract surgery. And so if they're looking for people who have really poor eyesight or have visual problems, then what's the best methodology to reach them? And they're also typically of an older age. Sure. So figuring out what the right methodology mix is for those customers, I think is an incredibly important thing.
No, this is a great example though, because I feel like, we're saying, as we think about methodology choices, we have to make sure that we're not over relying on survey research. And, the funny thing was in the beginning of the pandemic too, survey response rates went up. Like a lot of us saw like the, insanely high response rates at first. But now perhaps because as Michelle's saying, we've got this kind of online burnout thing, maybe we can't depend on that so much. Response rates might be falling back to what they had been before. And no matter what, we got to pay attention to the cognitive effort, the amount of work that we're asking people to do. And to be honest, I don't have research on this, but when I think about cognitive effort, I do think that right now, qualitative research, while it may take more of somebody's time to participate in a qualitative research event. And in a way, I think it's less cognitive effort than some of the surveys that I see. I see so many surveys where we are asking people to do trade-off exercises or to speculate about the future. And that's a big ask. In a more conversational setting, it's, I think, less cognitive effort almost to share that kind of information. So
I think the cognitive effort gets traded off to the researcher between those two things, right? We're putting in an online survey doing trade-off analysis like that, we're putting the effort into the survey taker's bucket. On the qualitative side, you're getting back much more unstructured information, very rich context, and then it becomes a larger lift cognitive effort on the researchers to synthesize that information. So there's a little bit of a kind of, I don't know, research methodology trade-off there, I think.
That's an awesome, I really like your observation there. I wonder how many researchers have wanted to do qual this year, but that said, I don't have time to go through. If I'm going to do qual on a topic like predicting post-COVID behaviors, I'm going to need to do it at a fair amount of scale. And God, analyzing that much qual data is going to be a nightmare.
So I do want to cheat a little because you said, things that were new this year. And there was some important research last year, but it came out in February and quickly got lost, and I don't think got the attention that it deserved. Had it been a normal year, I think it would have been the focus of conference topics and so forth. And that was from Pew. It was called Assessing the Risk to Online Polls from Bogus Respondents. And so they did a huge study, as only Pew could do. I think it was 60,000 or so respondents. They used panel marketplaces. They used a panel. They used what we assume is Mechanical Turk. They just say it was a crowdsourced platform. They used their own address-based sample. If you don't know, the way they do online research is they take a mailing list from the US of all the addresses and then take a random sample of that and invite people to join their panel. And if you don't have a computer access, they give you a tablet and they'll give you online access. So
that's for their American Trends panel, right? That's their American Trends big panel.
Yeah,
okay.
So they took it from a phone panel from random phone work to that online panel. So they also compared that. And so one of the things that they did was field a pretty standard questionnaire. It was on political, and then they applied kind of the techniques that most market researchers apply, which is checking for speeding, checking that people are paying attention. And they found that those checks, which I think a lot of folks still use today, were not really sufficient. So the trap question was something like, it's important that you pay attention as you're taking this survey. To indicate that you're paying attention right now, please check silver from this list. That kind of trap question. And then those who sped through the questionnaire. The formula I always use came out of SSI, which is you take people who were 0.48 or less than the median time it took to take the survey. Those are speeders. That was some work that Pete Cape did. So they found that the trap question and the speeding test really did not catch bogus respondents, which is their term for it. And
yeah, can I interrupt you for just 1 second? Because I just want to make sure that I'm 100% following you. So when we say bogus respondents, these could be real people who are maybe taking the survey just to try to collect points from a panel company or get some sort of incentive, or it could be some sort of automated, bot or whatever they're called that is sort of people who are just churning through surveys. And so it might, it might be an individual, it might be something that's part of a larger effort, if you will. Is that correct?
Yeah, and what it could be someone whose job it is to take surveys. Maybe they're part of a survey farm overseas, where the amount of money that is rewarded for surveys is consequential to them. Typically the amounts paid in the U.S. Are not consequential to most folks. They're electronic rewards, frequent shopper miles, frequent flyer miles, a few dollars. It's typically not material in the U.S., but it is material elsewhere. And so there's also those folks who are not native English speakers who are doing it because they were hired by a local company to do it.
Got it. So when we say bogus respondents, it can actually mean a bunch of different types of ways that the participants could be bogus.
It could, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And so when they did their analysis, they found that there were a bunch of people who took the survey multiple times, which is certainly the panel companies try to control for that, but that's a problem. They would enter non sequiturs. So a great way to catch them is open-ended questions. And they like, one of the questions was, overall, how are you feeling? And that got things like, this is a great product, and copy and paste from different texts. Or the big thing that you'll see now is people just clicking whatever's suggested by their smartphone. So you'll get these probabilistic conversational text. They call them conversational text. So it's basically kind of the random noise that you get if you just hit the next word on your phone. So they found that was a problem. Self-reports that living outside the U.S., IP addresses that were outside the U.S., those were big problems as well. And so as a result of that research, we started being more, so we'd used IP address for the US or for whatever countries we were surveying in. We became more explicit about asking, what country are you in? And in fact, we now ask, what country are you in? And we don't give them a drop-down list. We ask, what country are you in? And it's a text box. And so we found that, and then basically the first time we fielded it, we didn't throw out people. And we basically developed a long list of typos. My favorite is people who will put in a US flag emoji. So there's some of those. So yeah. So depending on how they're taking it. But so we have like 20 or 25 different things that we look for when they type into that. But it's shocking how many people put in their county. So they live in Plymouth County. And so when we first saw that, we changed it so it says country right before the text box. And there's still people. So it's actually an interesting attention check fail. There's people who put, they put their state or they put their county. And so I'm like, if you can't pay attention for the first question on my survey, probably don't want you to take my survey. So we've been using that to exclude them. And then also we like I said, we've already been using IP address. And then we have, there's been other research around, priming people to be honest. And so we ask people, which of these following words do you most associate with honesty? Ask them to pick the right word, and that kind of primes them hopefully to be in the right point. So those are changes that we've made, and we continue to look at the paper. I don't like to have too many public conversations about data cleansing, but I always encourage anyone who's working through data cleansing to give me a call. And I have had a number of good calls with folks this year where we've talked through what we're seeing and what we're doing to try to address these issues. And so we're continuing to go back to that paper and make some other changes based on it. So I encourage you to check it out if you haven't.
Mm-hmm. Do you folks see that too, that the sample budget is just not what it needs to be in many cases?
I think between budget and time too, I probably shouldn't say where I was working, but they created the ability for overnight results, and we're very proud of it. And I did a side-by-side of, leaving the field open for more than a day and looking at fast responders, and it led you to different conclusions. And so I think time and financial pressure, it's hard to not cave to that. And I think especially when I've been working a lot with other types of insights teams, right? And when they can turn, click data faster or search data faster or, first party data faster than primary, then you want to be able to have a fast response. And so there's a lot of pressure there.
That's a really interesting point, because I know a lot of insights teams now that are working in more with first party data or third party data, which obviously is much faster availability. And so that's really interesting, your observation that there's pressure to do survey research faster because the other data sources are basically available continuously.
Right.
Really, really interesting point.
Jeffrey, have you done any work on, those fast completers? And
so I did talk to, so it used to be that, and I go back to SSI, who, I think then they became eRewards and now they're part of Danita, but they published a lot as SSI that unfortunately is no longer available on their website of Danita. But, they originally had done a study about the challenges of doing, just-in-time research. There was definitely a skew to who's in front of the keyboard right now. I mean, obviously, if you launched a survey, at 7 a.m. Eastern time, it's not a nationally representative sample of who's in front of of who's in front. Typically, we have done every now and then for crisis communications work, we've done same day surveys, so like 4 hours. Typically, if you're not in a rush, I typically love to field on weekends. So launch the survey on a Friday afternoon. Typically we launch to those groups that we know are going to be the hardest to get. So those without a high school degree, those Hispanics, for instance, as a group, the cells that always take longer to fill. We start with those. And then on Saturday, we'll kind of open it up to everybody. And then, Monday morning, we'll do our data prep and analysis. So if I have if it's up to me and it's a consumer survey, that's how I like to do it. Now, B2B surveys, often the audiences are so narrow that it might be 2, 3, 4 weeks. Mm-hmm. And that's definitely not a message a lot of people are used to hearing anymore, right? Mm-hmm. It's going to take 4 weeks to get this. Well, you're looking for IT folks in organizations with 50 to 500 people who use these 3 apps. Yes, it's going to take a while. So definitely a different.
And be cautious of anybody who says they can do that overnight.
Yeah.
Right.
I have a client that I do some ongoing research for, and it's a B2B type of project. So I'm speaking with clients of my client. And one of the things that we looked at, it's a client loyalty type of initiative where we speak with, I speak qualitatively. I do interviews with a number of their clients every month. And one of the things that we've been doing probably for the past 18 months is really talking a lot about some of the challenges and some of the new challenges that our clients are facing in this environment today. And, I'll say, just to even back it up a step, one of the challenges I have as a researcher in reaching some of these folks is, where do I call them? And excuse me, in a lot of cases, I have both an office number and a cell number, and have found that it's awfully hard to reach people on that work number that they may have had, even if they had more of an office-based job before. So it's even in, how do we reach them, what kind of challenges they're facing, and how they have adjusted to remote, and now how they're adjusting back to what's the new, overused phrase, but what's the new normal. It's not going back to what it was, but how do we do things in this, Cindy, as you talked about, part-time remote, part-time maybe in the office or more in-person world. So those are some of the challenges that I'm hearing on the B2B side that people are wrestling with.
In the beginning, we talked a lot when the pandemic first started and we were all starting to work from home. There was a lot of talk about one of the benefits was the acceleration of needed technologies, that a lot of market research teams needed to be doing a better job of project management and knowledge sharing anyway. And many had been kind of putting off maybe those investments and optimizations, but now they had no choice. So it kind of accelerated certain types of business process improvements that really needed to happen anyway. So in the beginning, I was hearing a lot of that, but I'm with you folks. Now I hear that, a lot of teams have now improved their processes and their technology. Their team members have become more comfortable. People who may not have been so comfortable maybe with screen sharing, 2 years ago now, with screen share and, and chat and, and webcam at the same time. But it's the non-technical stuff that is still a little bit elusive. One thing that I heard from Maya Middlemas, who's an expert in the whole work from home space, and I did actually a video interview with her about, was it 4 or 5 months ago, that's available on our YouTube channel. And she's not specific to market research, but she's just a work from home expert and has been for years, from way before this. And one of the things that she talked about is the need to over communicate. That, things that you might have been able to communicate quickly or briefly in an in-person situation. She really coaches people on getting more comfortable with really over communicating. And that doesn't mean writing a 10-page email, because nobody's going to read that, right? But just the idea that you have to selectively repeat the information that you need to communicate to a colleague or a stakeholder, a team member, that you often do really need to make sure you repeat yourself over, the course of multiple meetings or conversations or emails, because that's going to be a way for you to make sure that you are communicating effectively. And because people are working from home and they do have distractions, they do have Zoom fatigue, it really becomes so important to try that very simple strategy of just making sure you are, in fact, over communicating.
I really think this is kind of a transition. Like, I know since we all said we've been doing this for over 25 years, we probably all remember working when there wasn't email. Right?
I remember when email came out. When email came out, yes.
And I remember when email first came out, my boss would print all his emails so that he could physically read them like a memo. And so, we all figured out how to get email to work, even though it was a foreign and impersonal mode of communication, as opposed to in-person or memos or phone. And then we got to where we kind of had to teach ourselves, when is it time to pick up the phone versus send an email and email best practices and, don't reply all. And so now I think we're just like entering that next phase of technology evolution. And we're going to have similar things of, when do you need to personally connect with someone outside of a scheduled Zoom with a whole bunch of people. And I'm actually working, I've got a gig that Research Rockstar helped me obtain with a company that's very progressive technologically and does a lot of work for tech companies. And not only are the studies that we're doing about advancing the working technology and communication technology, but they're using it themselves. And so I'm on a big learning curve of learning how to like, oh, someone's calling me on Teams randomly, I have to answer that. And so I think the times are going to, the technology is going to catch up with the times. And I think that ongoing human need to belong and connect and build relationships is going to be there to make sure that it remains human.
And then another topic or skill I think that's going to be important for 2022, and I know this one might sound a little bit odd, but in market research, obviously a lot of people have been working from home. And as organizations are starting to open up again, we're still seeing a lot of people working from home or companies offering hybrid or work from home options. And so another job ad that I'd seen recently was from Escalent, which is a large market research firm. And in their job ad, they basically say, if you want an in-office experience, then we have offices, I think in Michigan and someplace else. But the ad was placed for remote work. We're looking for market researchers. This is remote, you'll telecommute. And it's very common. I see lots of teams that are basically trying to be flexible. They want to get the best talent. They know that there's still a lot of emotional issues and uncertainties and family challenges right now, still ongoing. And so a lot of organizations are making that offer. And I know the signs I'm seeing suggest that a lot of market research professionals are going to choose hybrid or full-time work from home. I'm not seeing a lot of teams where it looks like everybody's eager to come back into the office full-time.
Yeah, and for those of you who can't remember, I just had to look it up. So Escalent is Market Strategies and More Pace, two great names merged. Because I'm like, I know them. Who are they?
Thank you.
And yeah, both great companies. Yeah, and so then it changes kind of the team dynamics. So like one of the things I found last year that's carried over into this year is certainly last year it was not fair to expect people working at home to be at their desk at 9. They might have had kids that they were taking care of who were now home all day, and just other things. And so sort of the expectation that they'd be at their desk from 9 to 5. I had to slowly disabuse myself of that when working with other people last year. And then part of it was realizing, well, then there's probably some skills that we need cross training on. So because we need more resiliency, that someone that in a traditional environment, you would have gone over to their desk and said, hey, I really need this. Now it's unfair to do that given the demands of these times. And so do you have other people who can do those skills? So I'm basically about book time this year. So
no, for Alchemer.
This is Lua. Yeah. So this is for Alchemer. So we do survey programming in a lot of different environments, but Alchemer, one of the reasons I recommend Alchemer is because they have a scripting language, which is based on Lua, which is an open source scripting language. And there were times where I would read other people's code. I don't usually program surveys, but then there'd be times where I'd QA it and I'd be like, geez, I really wish I could understand this better and make a change that now that I'm QAing it, it has occurred to me that I specified the wrong thing. So that's something that I've been, that's a skill that I've been working on, making sure that, not that you're going to hire me to do your Lua programming, but that when we do projects where we do that, I can be an asset or do a little bit of the heavy lifting. So.
I love that. That's great.
I feel like in the social media world, everyone's putting the best face forward all the time. And for these types of things, you really just have to be honest. You don't have to go on a webinar and announce that you're really bad at managing graphic designers, but, but have that honest conversation with yourself about where you need to improve your skills, and then, make the resolution or the commitment to improve that area of skills. And hopefully that's an area that you're aware that you need to improve, or maybe by soliciting feedback, either from your peers or from your customers, you realize that's something where we're not addressing. The other thing to add into that is, have you checked out your competitors' websites lately? Have you seen what they're talking about? Can you do that stuff? Do you want to be able to do that stuff? That's another competitive analysis is always tough, because because you only talk to people who are unhappy with other vendors. You don't talk to the people who are happy with them. So you have this blinded view of your competition. So it's always good to look and see what they're good at and evaluate yourself against that as well. So lots of ways to look for self-improvement.
Excellent. I really like that. And then I'm going to just add one small point on top of that, which is, I love this idea of whether you're looking at other market research agency teams or what other market research client side teams might be talking about that you can learn from. I always tell people you should also look at what the management consulting companies are doing, because there's a lot of management consulting companies that do market research these days. They do high-end studies that get widely read by the C-suite. And the way they do their studies, the way they blend data sources, the way they deliver their reports, obviously executive level clients are seeing market research reports, but they're also seeing these other market research reports from management consulting companies. Obviously, they have much deeper pockets, usually for high, they have graphic design teams, but it's still a great opportunity to learn and identify, things that we can apply in our own work.
Yeah, I love downloading, a lot of those reports might be somebody hired one of those firms to develop something that's going to be a lead generator for them. So you go and you've signed up now for some enterprise software that you'll never need, but you can read the full paper the way that they did it. And sometimes, it might be how they visualize something. It might be their methodology. It might be the way they went from survey findings to the ramifications of what those mean. But those are great reports that you can read and study. It's a great idea.
Beautiful.